Hello, beautiful, and welcome to the Come to Your Senses podcast. I'm your host, award-winning certified feminine embodiment coach, licensed esthetician, and enthusiastic foster dog mama to animals across the land, Mary Lofgren. Here, we explore how to bring more richness, radiance, peace, and pleasure to our lives, homes, and hearts through the joy of beauty, the wisdom of the body, the warmth of connection, and the splendor of the senses. I'm so glad you're here. Pull up a poof and let's dive in. Hello, beautiful beings, and welcome to Come to Your Senses. Welcome to a very special episode with a woman who I consider to be the real-life Marmee from Little Women, if you're familiar with the book or the film, Suzi Banks Baum. Suzi is a friend. She is a muse of Come to Your Senses. She's an incredible artist in many disciplines. But most of all, Suzi is a generous font of wisdom. We cover all kinds of topics from holy knowing to the connection between sensuality and creativity, the wild abundance of the natural world, including a guest appearance by a quince fruit and some dried marigolds. And so in a moment, I'll give you a few more particulars about Suzi's background, but I wanted to tell you first up that on the 19th, Suzi has a solstice writing circle, which is a chance to ground in and ground down and connect with the rich, velvety sweetness of the dark before solstice. So you can check that out, link below the episode. And also, Suzi is a contributor to the Sanctuary. And for members of the Sanctuary, which is our online Come to Your Senses community, this week you will find in your bundle a meditation from Suzi that she recorded with her toes standing on river stones with a babbling brook beneath her feet. So, without further ado, it is my delight to introduce you to a protector of the imagination, the nurturer of attention, and devotee to the handmade, Suzi Banks Baum. Suzi creates fresh traditions through the ceremony of daily creative practice. Suzi teaches bookbinding and book art in her backyard and in the country of Armenia. She brews dyes from locally foraged plants. She embroiders fervently, and she's generally obsessed with marigolds. Suzi's award-winning writing can be found in publications like Hypertext, The Good Life Review, Berkshire Magazine, and in the Guild of Book Workers Journal. Her signature teaching style has been called a feast for creative flourishing. And so now it is my joy to introduce you to my friend, my inspiration, my quince fondling queen, Suzi Banks Baum. I'm so glad to have you here. We were just talking about intentions, and I wanted to say I did a little writing before we got on, and some of the things I wrote are that anytime I come into contact with you as a human, or your work, your writing, your art, your activism, I feel inspired in such an organic way. Mm-hmm. Like the name of your work, or one of the names for your work, is Rising Forth. Mm-hmm. And you light a fire of fascination in me. Mm-hmm. With the ordinary, with the miraculous. And there are so many branches of your work: art camps, bookbinding, writing, mothering, cooking. But at the heart of it all is this connection between the creative and the holy. And I just want to say you do that so well, woman.
Oh. Like you live and embody and walk through the world as that. And so, welcome to Come to Your Senses. You inspire many layers of come to your senses with the way that you walk in the world. And just really, really happy and excited to have you here.
Well, thank you. And I'm really honored to join the circle of humans who you have spoken with and shared space with here, because you also ignite us in
Mm,
such an inclusive and gentle and fiery way. You know,
mm, thank you.
you are soft in this moment, but you are also ablaze.
A soft blaze. I am here for that.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
And to answer your question, I wanted to kind of launch in with that. But ultimately, come to your senses is about experiencing the sacred through the sensory body, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you have on your website is that daily creative practice is an expedition into your holy knowing. And I just love that so much. And what is the holy knowing? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is really the heart of my work. Holy knowing comes from a lifelong, whatever's deeper than hunger,
Mm,
to feel included and inhabited in the sacred. I was raised in a very Lutheran household, and God was something outside of me that I had to earn, like a merit badge.
mhm,
And this constant reminder that I was separate and that I was unclean and a sinner and guilty and full, should be shameful. Shame was a word that was used in my household a lot growing up. And in the paradigm of the organized faith practice that my family was immersed in, uh, I always felt unworthy. I always felt a little bit off, a little dirty, a little messy, had the wrong hair. It wasn't, there was always something. And as I've come to really examine and inquire around that hunger, I understand that a lot of that came from the conditions of my family life. But it resulted in years of looking for a faith practice that in which I felt included and seen, and in which the holy, because I had, alongside that hunger was this instinct, maybe, or maybe an ancient memory of being on fire with that
mhm,
and being absolutely ablaze in aliveness. And so, over the course of years of my work and writing and working with women, especially, but working with people who have felt excluded or not a part of, or I mean, artists are not all misfits, but we are, because we are in the culture, but we're also looking at it and inquiring of it and looking for places that sort of crave our particular juice. And so over the course of time, I began to name what I felt daily practice had allowed me to hear, which was my own interior dialogue, but also presence of the holy.
mm,
So for years of praying and supplicating and asking for, I began, and you know me, through years of meditation and writing and yoga and lots of ways of externally trying to access this place. It, as I softened really that urgency, I began to understand that it's here
mm,
and it's been here all along. And it does not need a man's name or a man. It doesn't need a gender. But given
mm,
the thousands of years of a gendered holiness, I call it her at times, just like I call the moon her. So that's where I came to holy knowing. Since we met, the Holy Ordinary has been very much in my attention. And I think if I stripped that away another layer, it's that sense of life is serving it up to us on a moment to moment basis.
Mhm.
And that if I keep looking elsewhere, I will miss what is absolutely ecstatic here in this, even if there's sadness, even if there's grief, even if there's pain, even if there's difficulty, fear.
Yeah. I simultaneously want to leap out of my seat and also just roll onto the floor like a dog onto its back because that I completely relate. And something that you do, like you are someone who, when I think of just unbridled creativity, like you are the first one to come to mind. I mean, just even, for those who are listening, it's like it looks like a hand stamped sweatshirt with like maybe a hand dyed scarf and some marigolds hanging dried in the background amongst dozens of paintings and just, like I wonder if you might speak a little bit to beauty.
Mm,
And it's almost like your daily creation of beauty in so many different forms is almost like a visual writing of psalms of this holy presence.
mm. Wow. So right now, where I'm sitting in my studio, I have, in fact, you're right, brought in the marigold malas from my studio outside because I can't, I work outside of my garage for as many months as I possibly can. And it's not a car storage place, it's my art studio. And the
And
smell,
Suzi lives in the Berkshires,
yeah, in Western Mass.
in
Yeah.
Western Massachusetts. Yeah.
On the land, I want to say, of the Stockbridge Munsee tribe of the Mohican people.
Yes. Thank you.
And for me, marigolds they're part of many different traditions of ceremony. And it's just a flower I grew up with, and the scent of them drying is really great. But I also brought a quince because when I think about coming to my senses, I don't know if have you ever smelled a quince?
I have not.
Oh, you can just go find, well, I don't know if the markets there will have them right now, but it's related to an apple. It's a hard fall fruit that is so fragrant. And I didn't grow up with them. I learned about them from an herbalist here in the Berkshires, and they were kind of exotic to me. And now, as I've gotten familiar with them, I've learned that especially in Europe and in the Middle East, the quince in the Spanish tradition, quince paste and manchego cheese is a real, like, oh, just delicious appetizer kind of food. But anyway, it's very fragrant. And a friend of mine who's Czech said to me the other day, as I was fondling a quince, he said, "Oh, my grandmother used to put bowls of them in the room where the laundry was kept because they would just spread their fragrance throughout the winter." And so the beauty, the daily creation of beauty, it really is for me derived from paying attention. And there's this poem that is one of my morning prayer practices by this poet, Annie Lightheart. It was in my newsletter the other day, so maybe you recall, but it's called Unwinter. And she writes, 100, 1,000 things on the list, all while the day hangs outside on a single silken thread. And if you look up, if you go out, all will be resolved, each salt grain dissolved, the day given freely to every early fool out in the yard, bareheaded, barefooted, and it goes on. But that, for me, that sense of looking up and encountering, marigolds are not a big invention. I didn't invent marigolds. They're here. And they're enticing. And, there's marigold dyed fabric right here that I wanted to show you this. I mean, I know your listeners are not watching this, but this color, like
Oh,
the color that marigold gives you is just, there's a generosity, I think, in nature that is part of what really fuels my work. And you notice that, and I appreciate that that my writing, it is deeply personal. I write memoir, I write creative nonfiction, but it's very much in relationship to the natural world. And going back to talking about the holy knowing part, as a kid, as I sort of made my way, let's say, in my family of origin, creative acts absolutely saved me.
Mm.
And at the time, I didn't think, oh, I'm coloring, this is saving me.
Yes.
But it was the thing I turned to. Being outside saved me. Those two ways of being. I didn't really think of myself ever as a visual artist until the last 15 years.
Really?
Yeah, because I didn't think of sewing. I didn't think of sewing or embroidery as art. I started sewing when I was 10, and yeah, I worked for Martha Graham. Yeah, I worked for a lot of really cool people, but I thought of myself as sort of the machine behind their vision. And it wasn't until I had the sort of breakdown that led to the moment when you and I met. My husband and I have a son and a daughter. And when my kids were 10 and 13, I really, really couldn't stand it any longer to be the person I was in those days, which was massively overcommitted. And I really had just so ground my interior voice down so much with being committed to everyone else's well-being that I had to stop. And so I think I hope I'm not getting off track here, but to answer your question about nature and beauty, it is a natural instinct for me to sort of organize a space with my hands as I move through the day. So whether it's the way I set up my desk or the way I open a journal page, the way that I teach, the way that I plan something, the way that I put together materials for a class, the books that I make, the fabrics that I dye, the way I use them, the way I stitch them, it all it doesn't feel segmented anymore. And I think part of what I'm speaking about in the times that were difficult for me is when my life was very segmented.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said about coloring, providing safe harbor.
Mm-hmm.
And I had the exact same experience, growing up in a very Catholic church, school, home. And, school especially was really hard on my little body. And then I remember our art teacher, her name was Mary Beth, and she actually years later, she was a family friend. And she was kind of like you, spirited, beautiful, feminine, creative. And she would come in and she'd teach art to us. And it was just like, I always felt in school like there was just something so wrong with me and I couldn't pay attention. And I barely made it through by the skin of my teeth grade wise, was the subject of ridicule by nuns around my stupidity. And then Mary Beth would come.
Oh.
And it was like my fairy goddess mother walking into the room. And actually, years later, she told me that I made her, I don't remember this, but that I made her a picture and it said, Mary Beth, Queen of Art. And, this kind of brings me to one of the questions I wanted to ask, which is around like the feminine qualities of creative practice.
Well, first off, I want to just send up a candle for Mary Beth wherever she is.
Yeah.
And sidebar, do you know the work of Corita Kent, Sister Corita Kent?
I don't.
Oh, please, you must look it up.
Yeah, I will.
Corita, Kent. She was a really important presence for art during the 60s, but she was a nun and she was a huge political activist, and her visual work, Mary Beth probably knew about her. I'll say that. That's one thing I wonder about. So for me, I feel that the qualities that make artists, whether they're writing murder mysteries or performing Shakespeare or writing haiku or dyeing fabric or singing or playing a saxophone, whatever it is, the initial stance is curiosity, which to me is intrinsically feminine stance, an openness, a setting aside of preconditions or common knowledge. You know, there's a real what if-ness about people who meet their daily life with an artistic stance. And I feel like it allows me, by really fostering my own femininity, my own sense of what for me makes me feel womanly, this is not to say I'm not ambitious and not to say that I don't want to succeed, but I want to get there with a sense of my inner life intact. I'm thinking about the early mythology about the female goddesses, and that how I learned the qualities of women with appetite was all in that sort of world of myth. It was not in the Bible stories. Mary didn't have an appetite. She rode on a fucking donkey when she was about to give birth. There was no mention of snacks or pee stops or what she drank, And I mean, it just is so for me, the Greek gods and goddesses had much more of a sense of fallibility. They ate the golden apple, or they drop the pomegranate seeds, or they descend and they rise up. And so I have always had that curiosity around being the person I came onto the planet as, a very comfortable being, and allowing those qualities to be qualities that can succeed. Because believe me, they were not qualities that were helpful to me in my early life as a theater artist. My sort of curiosity or my willingness to my femininity was something that very much got preyed upon and taken advantage of, and it was not a path to success. And yet it was something that was social currency. In my early life, it wasn't paying off, let's say. It wasn't getting me anywhere. And so, it took some really difficult years. I was also in my 20s, I was really struggling with living with someone who had some really terrible addiction issues. And it took my own sort of debacle during that period to pick myself up and put myself back together again, therapeutically, and become a little bit more comfortable with being who I was. And suddenly, or maybe not suddenly, I don't want to make it sound like a magic story, but little by little, I did have the sense of like, oh, I'm actually okay. I'm actually beautiful. My hair is not necessarily wrong. I can be this person who has multiple skills. And if I can't succeed in regional theater in the way that I want to, I'm going to succeed somewhere else. And I began to put together a life that allowed these other parts of me to exist in somewhat of an equal standing. I think that the longer I live, the more comfortable I am with being the woman that I am, with the cravings and appetites and sensibilities that I have that may or may not be identified as feminine, but they are the ways that I work really well and effectively in the world.
Hmm. I wonder if you might speak to, I mean, it's very surprising, deliciously surprising to me that you did not consider yourself a visual artist until, the last decade and change. And one of the things that I always find a stumbling block around creative practice, especially visual creative practice, is like this identity of like, well, I'm not an artist because I don't paint.
Yeah.
I'm not an artist because I don't really know how to do mixed media. Like I do the 3 splotches of colors on the palette and then I throw some collage pieces of newspaper clippings in there, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And your creativity, like I know in your writing, you're so expressive about like the sensorial majesty of the wild, like the way you speak about quince or the way you write about garlic ramps, and something I just so admire about you is the wildness, the untamedness, the organicness of your creativity. And for someone who might be listening and thinking, I'm not an artist, or I don't know where to start, or I suck at drawing, I wonder what seeds you might scatter to draw them deeper into their true creative path beyond just these external ideas about creativity.
Well, this is a really good question, and I think it helps maybe to consider some historical effort here, which is, at least speaking for myself, I grew up admiring paintings in museums and listening to all the church music and learning that these things were created by people who are considered geniuses, who were masters. We hear a lot about masters of technique and masters of the Impressionist era and all of these words that to my young developing self implied a kind of accomplishment that lowly old stinky me could never approximate. And so in my life in the theater, where my body, myself, my mind was my tool, basically my paintbrush, there was something very comfortable. Like at least I could take stage combat class and voice lessons and speech and tame myself for the task. And though I may never be a master, but I would at least have some skills. And and I absolutely am grateful, so grateful that you can appreciate the fact that I have a whole bunch of skills, and the sort of crossing point of all of them is this sense of fiery, wild expressiveness that is informed by skill. I'm the front row student. You want me in your class. Because I really believe in learning and expanding my skills and understanding technique. But when I finally get down to it, the marks that I make that are my own, that feel like I could identify my piece of work on a wall with 100,000 other pieces of work, is this sense of like it all goes on the page. And I don't feel this pristine lineage of, you know, color work that is derived from that sort of college of perfection doesn't call me.
Yeah.
And the colleagues, the people that I work with, my close collaborators, are all people who have multiple streams of expression, who are really drawn to the wilderness, who allow for that intersectionality and value the unrefined. And maybe I'm watching you nodding, like refinement was such a something that I sought to as a young girl, learning manners and learning a way of being a person in the world, being refined was an attribute. That was something that you wanted to do. And today, yeah, I set a very nice table. The knife and the fork and the spoon are in the right location. But my inquiry is much less, there's fewer guardrails, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so to spread seeds, it's that quality of beginning, of being, being in beginner's mind. We hear about that a lot. Like not having what you would think of as mixed media skills allows you to pick up a quince and say, well, what happens if I put some paint on this and then rub it on like that?
Mm.
And it becomes your entirely unique mark. If we think every collage needs to look like, name your Instagram star, if it all has to look like that, then how boring is that? It's just not interesting to me. So I think for me, what I encourage people to do who work with me is to allow yourself, don't do work that looks like mine.
Mm-hmm.
But let yourself play with these tools that I've experimented with and let them take you somewhere. And I've really watched a lot of people come to a quality of not contentment, like, oh, I've reached this field, I'm never going to leave it, but like a quality of like comfort with their pace. Like when you're teaching yoga and you see people who are clearly not going to do a handstand in the middle of the room, who are always going to be by the wall, but man, can they nail that handstand. Like I want people to understand a sense of, I have capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Creativity is the holy living in each and every one of us. It is not exclusive, doesn't require an MFA, doesn't mean you're blessed. It simply means you're paying attention.
Mm. Okay, let's just let that one settle on the breeze. Yes.
Yeah.
It simply means you're paying attention. God, yes. And I love the word creativity, but I know for some people, just the word creativity can sound exhausting.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's that Mary Oliver quote? Like, our endless proper work to pay attention. That is our
Yeah.
endless proper work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a needle in a haystack of light. I've gotten to know Mary Oliver's work really well. And I had the opportunity this summer to walk at Blackwater Pond on the Cape. Our national poet laureate, Ada Limon, was launching her project with the Library of Congress to commemorate an artist who was affiliated with one of our national parks. And she started this project in Provincetown at Blackwater Pond, where Mary walked nearly daily and composed many of her poems. And Ada, whose work, if you don't know it, I urge you to look it up. This project is all over the United States in I think 12 different national parks, including one in the Smoky Mountains for Lucille Clifton. Anyway, I got to recite a poem of Mary's to Ada just spontaneously. It was a thing in the moment. And it was one of those moments where you're like, yeah, there are people in the world who have spoken through their creative powers in a way that touches so many different people with meaning. And maybe that's what the Bible was for a lot of people for a long time.
Mm.
There are, I suppose, some passages of the Bible that are important to me, maybe. I'm entirely suspicious of that document, and I'm much more durable, like, yeah, Mary, I got you. I see where you are, and you're taking me to a place that I could not have gotten had you not walked around the pond that particular morning when the fox was sipping or the turtle was rolling or whatever was happening. It's sweet that you mention her.
Well, her work, I sense a deep resonance between her work and your work, particularly in the sensuality of it.
Mm.
And, your writing, it's like every other Saturday morning, I'm rubbing my hands together.
Oh, you are so sweet.
Because the Suzi Banks Baum is coming to my inbox. And that kind of leads me to my next question. How does your sensuality and your sensuality as a woman, how does that cross paths with your creative practice?
Well, it's where my creative practice lives. Growing up in the way that I did and discovering that sex, indiscriminate, wild sex for a significant, let's say, period of my life was both interesting and stimulating and pleasurable and exciting to me, but also was a way that I could move socially. And I was confused for a very specific period of time, thinking it would move me professionally, and it obviously didn't, thank God. But, to come to the point where I lived through that time and I sort of lived clean of that time, and then met Jonathan and we had our children, and motherhood really allowed me to feel that my sensual life and my sexual life were both meaty and important parts of me that had expression in a daily way that didn't have to include seduction or fucking. Like, we can swear, right?
Totally.
And so I began to understand that my femininity, my body was not a mistake. It wasn't currency. And to come to that really while I'm blowing the noses of my children and making dinner and doing all that for years and years was massively comforting and allowed me to kind of inhabit it without a sense of shame or without a sense of having to be guarded because who knows what the heck is going to happen around the next corner.
Mm-hmm.
My sensual self is every part of the way that I encounter the day. That's why I make myself really beautiful books. I no longer write in wire-bound little spiral notebooks. No way, man. I make these beautiful books. You know what they look like, that are a nest for my holy knowing. It's
Okay. Can we just a nest for my holy knowing? Just needed to slow that one down. Make sure that pebble could skip across the lake and create some heavy ripples. Yes, a nest for my holy knowing. I know so many women who have beautiful journals and don't write in them.
Well, that is one of my main missions, Mary. I have been in so many work situations in a teaching capacity or as a student where I see people creating these gorgeous books, beautiful, tons of technique, pouring themselves into the painted paper, whatever, all of the parts that make up the book. And then they say, well, it's too nice to write in. And as I began to hear that more and more and more, like, I only write when I go to this conference. I don't write every day because I can't do it on my own. Or I could never write in that book. It's too special. Well, this is the Bible of your soul. If I am in a habitation of the sacred, then my expression is worthy of the finest of parchment. There's absolutely, like, I am desecrating my own temple to diminish my voice. And I know you know
Yes.
exactly what I mean.
Yes. And I have been that woman in the
I
book,
know you have been.
you know? And I really appreciate the encouragement to allow all parts of ourselves to be sacred and holy in that process of allowing, like, because when I think about sometimes when I journal because I'm anxious
Yeah.
and I don't want to put my hairy ass Linus cell, or no, not Linus, hoot pig pen
Big
self
pen. Yeah.
on the pages of this beautiful thing. And you're so right. Like, if not there, where?
Where I have worked in the country of Armenia for a number of years, and they are the home of illuminated manuscripts, these ancient, beautiful books that contain the original, well, for them, the translations of the Gospels into Armenian, but these first documents of philosophy and language and village practices and all of these things, medicine, science, and I look at them and I admire their gorgeousness. And I wonder what else there was to say about that time, and and
Mm,
I mean, this is true throughout the last, say, I don't, 500 years. We have like zero, not zero, but we have very little evidence of women's experience.
yes.
Even maybe your grandma. Like, do
Yes.
you have letters or books? Did she write? Like, there's a really beautiful summary after the book Pachinko. Oh, the author's name is escaping me in the moment, but it's like the discussion with the author at the end of a novel. And
Hmm.
she, in that book, it's an incredibly researched book about South Korea and Japan during World War II. And she talked about the difficulty about writing about women's lives in that not so long ago time, because there is so little written record of women's lives. And
Hmm.
I feel like, how can we really assess history and the development of our culture if we don't have an equal representation of women and men's voices? So I think there's a cultural prerogative for us to take note. And your hairy ass pigpen self is as equally welcome on the page as is your absolutely divinely delivered jewel-like tones. I think if I taught this workshop the other day to a large group of people who make really beautiful books, but are, for some of them at least, reluctant to work into them. And so I taught them 3 or 4 different techniques for privacy. Because one of the main things that keeps people from writing, whether it's in a spiral bound notebook or a beautifully hand bound book, is, what if someone reads this? What
Hmm.
if my children read this? And there are a number of ways that cultures through time have, women in different cultures through time have developed to obscure their writing. And it's a really helpful skill to have, because when you do get to that hairy part and you're like, oh, I can't write this. What if my, I mean, the common trespass. What if my sister opens my journal, or what if my kids, or what, it's in your bedstand. I mean, I understand that some of that it would make people's lives very difficult, if not dangerous. I appreciate that, and I have witnessed that. But there are ways to obscure your writing so you can have that cathartic experience of writing it, getting it out of your body, getting it out of your head. I witnessed this so many times, where people finally can put an experience onto a page or into a piece of work, whatever, and live beyond it.
Mm,
Because if we have to hold all that, how can we possibly move forward? How can we rise forth if we are not unburdened and allow that stuff to integrate? Putting it on the page, there's a whole body of research around that sort of therapeutic aspect. But in my experience with it, it certainly helps me, let's say, to be able to get on the page and get something out of my head.
I love that clarity that once we put it on the page, we can move beyond it. We can live, we can have a new experience. You know, when I'm doing embodiment coaching and these unfelt feelings rise to the surface, and there's a process where, you know, we return that feeling from stuckness to flow. It's like, oh my God, there's so much room in here now.
Right.
So much room for possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that my life is evidence of that room, you know, the moments, the sort of turning point moments for me as a kid, when I got into recovery in my late 20s, early 30s, when I met Jonathan, and then when my kids were 10 and 13, like those moments were times when I finally let a difficult truth out of my head, out of my body, and into the world, onto the page, into the safe space of a therapeutic setting, into the shared experience with my partner. And that's, I think, what expression is. You know, it's not only, you know, the raindrops on the rose petal, but it is, this is what I saw. This is what, you know, this is what I felt when I saw it. This is what I remembered when I saw that. And, you know, suddenly our life begins to sing a little bit. Like we have like, oh, that's not just all ballast behind me. My past is not ballast. It's information. It's reference. It's, you know, and it feeds the force of who I am today.
Mm, mm. I love that clarity of what is the point of expression, and just like the significance of documenting our stories, even if nobody ever reads them, you know?
Yeah.
And so I want to
Yeah.
ask you if there's anything I haven't asked you yet that you would like to be asked.
All right. Well, I'd like to be asked. You've asked such great questions, or thrown some great pebbles into the pond. There's a seasonality to my work. I think seasonality is something that I'm learning more and more is important to tend to. And I was thinking a lot about the most recent podcast where you were referring to when you were talking about pumpkins and, you know, acorn squash and all of that. But that has really allowed me to feel like, yeah, there's all these things that I do, and I don't do them all the time. And that permission to have, like the winter is my deep writing time. I don't teach in the winter if I can help it. And I feel really strongly about honoring. I think that's part of what being in nature so much teaches me, is that I am massively productive and happy, but I have to be fed. You know, I have one of my mantras is I am an unflinching blaze, a fire that must be fed. And and that requires rest, it requires nourishment, it requires fireside evenings with Jonathan where we don't really talk, or we binge watch the Great British Baking Show, you know, whatever it is that we need. And that, you know, my big visual months are very much related to the sunny months, and when the plant world is really out there and wanting to play with me. So yeah, I think seasonality, because I think also something that in particular women are sensitive to is light. And and the dark season is, I mean, I don't know if you have a lot of Southern Hemisphere listeners, but you know, I'm aware that in the Northern Hemisphere, this time of year is especially challenging. And here we are expected to be joyful and cheerful and jubilant, while our human self, our bodied self, is like quiet and wanting to burrow and be warm and be held and, you know, eat your acorn squash soup and and be in this sort of quieter, more reflective place. So, I think that, you know, that has led to my teaching of this Advent Dark Journal workshop. But I think that it really rose out of my despair around the holiday season and feeling so wrong and out of step and out of kilter and resentful and, well, lots of things.
Yeah, what I hear you saying is like, well, I just really appreciate the seasonality piece. I've been one of the things that I love so much about the Bay Area that was a total surprise to me is that I've been going to this church called Her Church. And it is a goddess centric, it's a former Lutheran church, still actually in the Lutheran family. But Pastor Stacy, she's an ordained Lutheran minister, and she had a spiritual awakening around the divine feminine. And we start the service by confessing the sins of white supremacy and racism as a river that flows from the ocean of patriarchy. And the whole service, okay, Suze, the whole place you go in and it's like a regular church, but everything is the goddess. There are
Whoa.
hundreds of sculptures and art pieces and paintings and goblets and candles, and it has changed my life. Like
Oh, I don't doubt that.
it is like I didn't think I would live long enough to see an actual church where the goddess is not just represented but centered, you know?
Mm.
And one of the things that I'm learning is for me being a kid who grew up in a town of 1,000 people and hightailed it to New York City as fast as I possibly could once I came of age, my relationship with nature has been, I'm a lover of the great indoors, let's just say. And this experience of learning about the goddess and nature and pagans and Wiccans and the alignment with the seasons, that's kind of why I got onto this tear. You talk about winter and reducing the expectation
Mhm.
to produce and to shine,
Mhm.
and following that as a rhythm and aligning your body with that rhythm takes the importance of rest beyond this cerebral concept of something I should be doing for my well being
Mhm.
into a joyful, therapeutic celebration and partnership with the sacred through creativity and beauty. I just really vibe with you there.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
And like,
take me into that church with you when you're in there next. Like,
oh,
just let me sit next to you. I would just roll over.
I, if you're ever in California,
Well,
we will go. I'd love for our listeners to hear about your offerings in general and anything else you'd like to share about your beautiful community.
sure. Well, Advent Dark Journal is really a response to the expectations that I felt as a mother, as a person in a community where church was still a part of our life at that time, and really how out of sync I felt with the season and the holiday clangy quality. And it it's a 6-week online learning experience where I deliver a really beautiful curated art packet to everyone through the mail. And the lessons are released 1 week at a time. And so there's a paced quality to it. Like you don't do everything all at once. You have this, and each week has a theme. We totally watch the moon. The moon is one of the most prominent guiding principles or forces or presences for Advent Dark Journal. And it is a way to create an oasis for yourself during a time where I think a lot of people feel the demands diminish, and the demands don't diminish. The demands on you diminish your own. They certainly have diminished me, let's say. And if you have little kids, there's just constant sense of wanting, doing, have to be here, do this, wear this, have this perfectly packaged something. And I just that whole ethic of perfection and performing the holiday season, in a picture perfect way. Just absolutely, just is soul crushing. And it so takes you away from what's happening in the natural world. And it really is a way to kind of appreciate and access the richness of the year that it's coming to a close, and turning to the new year with a sense of refreshment, like, rather than dragging your ass over the finish line. And, and I mean, I had bronchitis every January for like 9 years running.
Wow.
What is that about?
Right.
So that's where Advent Dark Journal comes in, and it's really sweet. And then I teach in real life stuff in the summer months, my backyard art camp, and things like that. So if people are interested in my work, I will encourage them to sign up for my newsletter.
It is a gold fleck in the eye of your inbox, everybody. It is irresistible. I highly recommend it. Well, I love you and am so grateful for the magic you bring to the world and to my life, and so happy to share you with my listeners. And so if you go to SuziBanksBaum.com, SuziBanksBaum.com, and of course, all those links will be below the episode. And thank you so much for being here.
You are most welcome. It's so sweet to spend time with you.
I desire more.
Thank you. May it be so.
If you enjoy what you hear here on the podcast, you'll be besotted by my complimentary audio series, The Enchanted Path of Beauty. This collection illuminates the multifaceted nature of beauty as a path to healing, spiritual fulfillment, and deep connection. Head to schoolofsensualliving.com/beautiful or click the link below this episode to discover the profound healing powers of beauty today.